Hey there, we're live. Steve August here, and with another conversation with Steve. And I hope everybody is staying healthy and keeping sane in this wacky COVID world that we live in. And today I'm really, really excited about the conversation that we're going to have. One of the big seminal kind of moments or memes of this experience that we're all having together is this the huge run on toilet paper. How that toilet paper became emblematic of this crisis. The fact that all of a sudden the first thing or the most important thing that people felt that they needed to do was go out and get toilet paper. And so it got me to thinking about this idea of the wisdom of the crowds versus the madness of the crowd. So over the last couple of years, there's been this idea of the wisdom of the crowds, that we are smarter collectively than we are separately, which is a great sentiment. But on the other hand, there's this idea that crowds can go a little mad, and I think we're seeing that a little bit with the toilet paper shortage that we seem to have. So this got me to thinking about one of the people that I've known for a very long time in the market research and insights business. One of the first people I actually met in the business, Kevin Lonnie, President and CEO of KL Communications and long-suffering Jets fan. One of the first people I met in the industry, and so a long-time friend. And he's been in this game for a long time. He founded KL Communications back in 1996, and has been working on both the client and supplier side. But KL Communication has been his baby for all these years. And in 2015, he developed his CrowdWeaving methodology to empower customer creation. But one of the reasons I really wanted to bring Kevin on board is because he has made a life study of the crowds versus the wisdom of the crowd versus the madness of the crowd. Of how do you get people together to feel innovation, and how do you actually leverage their dynamics? So without any further ado, I am going to welcome Kevin Lonnie to our little show here. Hey Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Steve. I'm doing good. I'm honored to be your go-to expert on the toilet paper shortage.
Oh, well, we're really happy to have you here, and we're happy to have everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to add that to my resume.
Yeah,
thank you.
We're happy to have everybody who's watching along. Dan Dersh, good to see you. John Daniels, good to see you. So one of the things that you've been studying for years is how to. Is this kind of duality of crowd behavior, right? On one hand, we can be collectively wise, and on the other hand, it seems like we can be collectively mad. So, based on what you've been studying, like how do you approach this? What is a good way for people to think about this?
Well, that's part of what makes it fascinating, Steve. This duality, because everything you've said is correct. So they seem like they're in conflict, right? And when you think of collective wisdom, I mean that's good. Okay, then that's showing us at our best. But if you think of like conventional wisdom or prevailing wisdom, I mean that's usually pretty much dumbass wisdom. I mean that's generally like. The prevailing thought is like some expert has written something like the prevailing thought was the earth was flat for about 1,000 years too. So it's not necessarily us at our best. And that's the thing that's fascinating about the wisdom and madness of crowds, is because the person who can be mad in the crowd can also be one of the wisest people if you get them in a more collective situation. It's just So that's the part that I find kind of fascinating.
Awesome. I mean, I think.
Let me talk to you about the toilet paper thing.
Oh yeah, let's get that. Yeah, let's get right to that. Why is that happening?
Anyway, I don't really have any good news to report if you're hoping to find your supermarket stocked anytime soon, because the toilet paper shortage is a couple different things involved. First of all, when people are confused, when they're getting conflicting messages, like this is COVID-19 is horrible, COVID-19 is going to, magically go away. It's, they're getting conflicting messages. And then when that happens, there's also this sense of like the fear of missing out too. They suddenly notice that there's a run on toilet paper. So it becomes like this this need that has to be satisfied for no particular reason. So that's unfortunately what happens is when we get into a herd mentality and a tribal mentality, which happens when we're confused and we're not quite sure what direction we're going to go into, that we kind of dumb down. And unfortunately, that's what's causing this effect to take place. And I don't see it ending anytime soon. I think there'll probably be other typical examples of sort of that herd need to do something until, we kind of get past this pandemic.
Yeah, it seems like, so what you're saying is when we're in confusion or in fear and uncertainty, then it is challenging. So people will go to behaviors that in normal, like unstressed times, would not make sense.
Yes. And, it's a little bit, an analogy you could make is like, the sort of system one, system two thinking. Mm-hmm. When we're in our herd or tribal, we're system one, okay? We're not really thinking as much for ourselves. We're pretty much on autopilot. We're getting our direction from, whoever is the leader speaking for our tribe, and we're kind of following suit. Mm-hmm. There's a certain comfort in that. That's why, the fellow Charles Mackay, who got this whole thing started with his book, Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, which goes back to 1841. Mm-hmm. He talked about that. Like, we go crazy in herds and only regain our senses one by one.
Right.
And then James Surowiecki, who wrote the Wisdom of Crowds, really referring to the idea of the collective wisdom. So it's two schools of thought, but the idea is, if you want to say, is the crowd wiser, is the crowd, or is there wisdom in crowds? Unfortunately, for the most part, I think most sociologists and psychologists have come to the determination that the crowd mentality is not wise. It's the collective mentality that can be. So, yeah, when there's a run on toilet paper, I mean, that's just we've just gone tribal. We've just decided we need to protect everything about us. And, we have like this incredible, subtly utility value placed on TP. So
right.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, well, I think, you said two different words there. You said the crowd and the collective.
Yeah.
So help me understand the difference between the crowd and the collective.
The crowd is dumb and the collective is wise. That's, I mean, and I'm simplifying it a bit, but, when you're in the crowd, far from the maddening crowd, whatever the case may be, there's a certain kinship and there's a spirit in that, but you're all pretty much, you have gone tribal, you've gone into a herd, and you see this in certain amounts of, popularism, et cetera. You got half the country watches CNN, MSNBC, and then the conservatives are watching Fox, and never the twain shall meet. And it's very comforting in a way, because they're just reiterating what it is that you want to hear. So you're not really challenging anything that you're hearing per se. And I think we're all sort of can fall into that. But the collective idea is the fact that the collective is actually collaborating, is listening, is willing to change their thinking, working towards a greater good. It's a more difficult force to gather than sort of like getting the crowd all worked up. That's easier. It's easier to get people to descend than it is to get them to ascend.
Right. So, and that it seems to be like we live, even before the pandemic hit, we were living in those times of increased tribalism and populism. And I just you had done some thinking about what you call the Brexit insight curve that kind of speaks to this. I'm going to put it up on our screen. But
sure.
It shows these lines of insight, number of people, deliberation, diversity. Right. So tell me what this all means.
Well, essentially, it's the idea is that on the one arrow, your y-axis is the idea of the optimum amount of insight you can receive, and then deliberation over time. Mm-hmm. And it's this, I think it was I'm not looking at it at the moment, but I think it's Bank of London but it was an interesting idea showing that sort of like the maximum value of the crowd was as you increased the amount of diversity and got more different thinkers in. But the enemy gather of group thinking always becomes deliberation. The longer it takes, we move towards consensus because we are social creatures. We don't always want to we want to make sense of it all. So the longer we do this, we start to no longer challenge what's going on. We start to make up our minds. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the nemesis of the wisdom of crowds. You've now moved away from collective wisdom to now prevailing wisdom. So that was an interesting, example of really just a straight economic report where wisdom descends into madness. And it's like if something drags on for a long period of time, you're no longer, getting the best of people. There was an article like New York Times did this around the same time. It was like literally the title was "The United Kingdom has gone mad," and there's a story about the French Europeans Affairs minister. She named her cat Brexit, and she chose the name because he wakes up every morning meowing to death because he wants to go out, and then when I open the door, he stays in the middle, undecided, and then gives me evil looks when I put him out. So it's so it's like whatever you want to say about Brexit, it's still going on, right? But it is an example of where sometimes when you deliberate too long, and people get just they get really steadfast in their beliefs, you can't you get locked in and nothing gets done. Everyone just gets tribal.
It's really fascinating because it sounds, if I'm understanding your meaning, you're saying there is a point in time. So when people first get together, diverse people get together, there is, in the early stages of that there becomes a collective wisdom. But as time moves on, that wisdom fades. So the longer we're in diverse company, the more, after a certain point, the more we get tribal. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's you got that right. That's the conundrum. That's actually, if you think about brainstorming, right, and group brainstorming, and as you said, I've done some research on this, and pretty much the prevailing thought, if you will, or the collective thought on that is that brainstorming is a waste of time. And the reason is you have these few seconds of like this primordial awakening, and these ideas are going out fast and furious. And within just a matter of minutes, because we are social creatures, we start moving towards synthesis and consensus. And then suddenly somebody's got like this really great, out of left field idea, is afraid to say it because of the fact we've already moved past it. And that type of thinking isn't allowed. So once you get into that social kind of situation where it's and you see this in the corporate side, to say something that's against what is now the accepted reality is really difficult to do. So you have to this, you have to embrace the chaos and the energy of the initial diversity, and find a way of maintaining that as you start to coalesce around it. So it's a tricky situation. You have to get the exact balance of diversity and then conversions.
So yeah, so now you've actually spent your a lot of your career in the insights business working with this dynamic. So what have you seen more? How do you actually do that? Because one of your offerings I know is online communities, ongoing online communities, and within those you have a tool called CrowdWeaving that actually helps people leverage this collective wisdom and creativity to create innovations.
Right.
So how have you been able to deal with these dynamics that are kind of in conflict with each other?
A lot of long walks, some musing over a couple beers, because it is like, how do these things reconcile with each other? And they don't always, and it's a matter of like, well, at some point they should. So, okay, two different things. Yeah, an online community, that's our bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a 24/7 infrastructure, allows you to speak to your customers using a wide range of research tools. Mm-hmm. My feeling is that most research tools are a bit reactive. They pretty much, we come out with the stimuli, be it like a moderator's discussion, a survey, and the individual reacts to it. So what we wanted to do was create something that was more proactive, and that's where we came up with the CrowdWeaving idea. Because the interesting thing, kind of maddening thing, if you will, is that the product innovation success rate isn't moving up. It's still staying the same. And it's like, well, wow, with all the machine learnings, all the text analytics, all the data we have, access to, we have so much about the what's, but the why still remains tricky. Like, even if you think of it from a design thinking thing, like, the job to be done, understanding what is the job to be done, but you still don't really get at why the person needs to do that job, or why they suddenly need toilet paper. There's underlying things there. So what we wanted to do was create that initial power of diversity through ideation, where it was individual ideation. So you're not seeing anyone else's idea and being biased by it. And then the idea is, after those ideas are done, then you move to more of a collaboration stage, and you add some gamification, and you try and get everyone to work cohesively. The first time we did that, we actually did a project for a major airline, and it was how to do the online booking if you're booking multiple flights. Like airlines had it down to a science if it was a round trip or one way, but if you're booking multiple flights, like if you were going to a series of groups, that was tricky. So we laid it out there, and actually the frequent flyers came up with something that was really a game changer and was great. I didn't do a good enough job at the time of selling it in to the internal constituents at the airline. So that's something where, again, I get smarter over time. It was like they were looking at it as a threat. And I think the idea is, if you want to use, the wisdom of crowds, or internally, for it to take root in the organization, the internal creatives need to feel like they're part of this process, or they have a sense of ownership from the beginning. So since then, I've tried to position it more as like a way of getting to a better starting point. Right. Like, look at what they're trying to solve here, and use it as a muse or inspiration to your talents. And so positioning that way is more successful. So it's like one of the things that, I think what I was initially, customer co-creation to me was a little bit too much of customer crowdsourcing. And now I realize it's going to be effective. It really needs to be, customer, employee, management, create, all being part of the process.
Yeah, it sounds like you learned that that it's not just the customers, it's the internal teams that also are in the midst of this wisdom of this tension between wisdom and madness of crowds and collectives.
Yeah. And it's tough because, corporations by definition are going to be risk adverse. And which makes sense. You want to go out and try something really crazy, well, that's fine. But, it's a lot easier to go for something that's incremental and safer. So there's this sort of battle, between really, substantial forms of innovation, but they're so different. And if you can't get them championed within the organization, your chances of actually having them implemented are, like nil.
Yeah. So, as people who are in this situation, they may be at a company that is, in every pandemic, like in every crisis, I should say.
We've had so many.
Yeah, we've had so many. No, in every crisis,
we don't have another one.
It seems like some companies get disrupted and some companies get boosted, and there's companies in between. And so, what if you're inside a company, if you're leading company, if you're responsible for just creating something or keeping a business going, where do you see leveraging the wisdom of the crowds right now working? What would you advise people to do at this point?
Well, I know you and I were talking a little bit before the call about the fact, what's the new normal going to be, right? Mm-hmm. And, the old Gretzky line, skate to the puck. Well, where the hell is the puck going this time? It's probably not going where I would normally expect it to go. Mm-hmm. So you come out of this with this need to potentially update your business model really quickly. And, I've seen on the market research side of things, it's some clients are doing more work, but mostly it's COVID-19 related. Mm-hmm. I don't see a lot of new innovation work being done because of the fact, why would you want to introduce a product now? But yeah, there probably is a need to be spending the time and researching and being ready to move when the time is right to move. So I think this is a good time to consider doing things differently. I think a lot of corporations give lip service to being customer-centric. The customer comes first, but they don't really have an active mechanism to allow that to take place, to get the inspiration and the collective wisdom of their customers. I think the idea is that the customer is only capable of knowing so much, mm-hmm. which is true. They don't have the same level of internal expertise in what can be manufactured and how cost effective something can be. But there needs to be a better pipeline of capturing that chaos of diverse thinking. Mm-hmm. There's a thing called the diversity theorem, which is really at the heart of what Surowiecki was writing about. Mm-hmm. And why do you want to have the wisdom of crowds? It's because they're smarter than any individual expert. And that's what this has proven over time, that a diverse group of problem solvers makes better guesses than that produced by any one expert. Mm. So that's the idea. So that's the untapped potential that still exists. And so it's a matter of, well, how do we channel it? Mm-hmm. And, it's not easy, but I think it's doable. I have here's a prop, if you will. Okay. So let me show you this.
I love the props.
This is a game called Shoot the Moon. Okay. Mm-hmm. And literally the idea of the game is you have to propel a silver ball uphill. So imagine, if you will, the silver ball is ideation, and you're trying to propel it uphill. So that's okay. That kind of seems difficult. But what you do is you actually open the rods a little bit, which allows gravity, which it represents our diversity and the initial chaos of group thinking, Then you tighten the rods, which creates a kinetic energy, which allows it to go further and further. So that represents the convergence, which is like adding the wisdom of the internal experts and starting to come up with like, well, how can we actually make this idea happen? So anyway, that's the end of my props.
All right.
But
great prop.
Yeah, one per episode, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, well, that was all the budget would allow too. By the way, letting the viewers know that these Steve August productions are pretty tight with the $24.99 for any production elements you want to bring to your show.
Yeah, we can afford
that. Yeah. Anyways, that's just an analogy of it, and so it's, but that initial release of gravity, that diversity, is something that the crowd can provide, and you're not going to get that from within the organization.
Right. Excellent. Just want to say hi to Jerry Lazor, just joined. Thanks for watching, Jerry. Good to see you. Yeah, so if
hopefully Jerry gets the budget.
Yes. So if you're in a business right now, your customers in early March are not the customers they are now. Like,
yeah.
We're all different, right? So whatever understanding you had previously now has to be kind of reset. So if you were, advising a company on how to like go to their customers and help them, ask them to help you understand the world as they see it, how would you
Yes.
advise people to do that?
It's like playing up to your audience. I mean, give them more credit than they might normally receive. What I would do is issue a challenge that's relatively as transparent as possible, that has certain parameters of what it is that you're looking for. I would have that answered on an independent basis, and allow that to go for a few days. Our experience has been that there's never been a really great idea that comes in the first couple hours. It's usually after someone has, thought about it and, had an idea in the middle of the night, or is suddenly taking a shower, or they're on their way to work and suddenly they think about something. And then when other folks start to see it, because again, we use the gamification process, we see what ideas are going the best. And we also, some people prefer to comment on ideas and kind of like say, hey, this is great, but I don't know what you're talking about here. So you get that kind of energy going as you start to see certain ideas rising up. And if you share that with the organization going, from the beginning, again, a mistake I made up until recently, then they feed off that energy too. And it can, like I said, get you to a better starting point. And so the idea is, okay, if 90% of new products fail, if you can get to a better starting point, can you make that a better percentage? Can you double your success rate? And can you, in fact, channel the collective wisdom of your customers? And so that's a challenge. But again, I think the framework is you need to let the crowd ideate independently. Don't let them become the crowd, the herd, because there's no wisdom to be had there. Right. Individually, you can get a lot, but you do want them to collaborate too and vet each other and have the internal stakeholders feel they're part of the process too. So in that, it's the recipe is very exacting. You add too much at one point, it's going to fall apart. If you wait too long, it's going to fall apart. But you get better at it over time. It's like the first time I played this shoot the moon game. It's like, it's frustrating at first because you can't get it, to go very far at all. And then you do find you get better and better, over time. So that's part of it too. Patience, persistence, and allowing your customers to be get you to that better starting point.
Right. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that you give people the opportunity to join in and pipe in and reflect what their experience is individually, then reflect it back to them as a group, and then go from there.
Yes. You share that. Yeah, that's part of it. It's like, you know, again, it's like these opposing forces. You don't want the group to coalesce, too quickly. You don't want them to, get tribal. You want to allow them, and you need to also step in and moderate, and make sure everybody stays civil and cordial. That has to be clear. You can't let confusion set in. Get another run on toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have kind of exacting structure in place to. It's like a bit like fracking. You want to kind of like just extract the wisdom of the crowd, but to do that, you got to go through a lot of separating the wheat from the chaff to pull that off. But you have, that's part of it. There's going to be a lot of stupid ideas that come out of this, but there could be a couple things like that are just like, wow, that is something we haven't really tried. Maybe there is something there. And again, so that can inspire. And, there's something to be said from the CRM standpoint, if you can also point out that part of the changes you're making are caused by customer direction. But, as a businessman, my main thing is like, I just want to like, be in a position where I can make as much money as possible. And it's like, I just think that the way to tap into that hasn't really been pulled off consistently very well. Even design thinking doesn't really rely on customers too much. It's just like it's a small group that gets together and then they iterate and they do some really half-baked market research. But it's like Agile, we keep going back and forth. But there's really nothing where they're asking customers themselves to be part of the ideation process.
Right. So it does seem like, just having a structure, being thoughtful about how you're going to bring people's opinions in, how you're going to reflect that back to them, and then take that in. And that idea that there's going to be ideas that don't really make the cut, that'll feel really out there.
Yeah.
But, if you think about it, like, if you came up with an idea that said, I think people are going to be able to share rooms in their homes, and we can facilitate that,
Yeah.
that, people would be like, you're crazy. Then nobody's going to open up their home to strangers. And, one of the,
Right.
The Airbnb comes out of that because somebody's,
Right.
enough people, it started to make sense. And you just never know. So giving room for those ideas to have audience seems like,
right.
And it seems like it's critical, if I'm here understanding correctly, it's critical to capture those ideas and then be very cognizant of when you're reflecting back to the group or the crowd of when groupthink and common sense has taken hold, because then you know that you're not getting the best out of that potential idea.
Yeah. When things go tribal and when people deliberate too long, then the magic goes away, and you're not gonna get the best of them. But yeah, I mean, it's you talk about Airbnb or Uber, like a couple of the most disruptive companies that have come along. Even if they're struggling right now, okay, during the pandemic, I mean, what's going to fall out of that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so nobody wants to find their business disrupted, right? And it's like, then everybody's a genius in hindsight. Why didn't you see this coming? Well, who could, right? But as you point out, the pandemic is just such a game changer. It's like the ultimate, change card, or in Monopoly. You don't know what it's going to do to your business. So it behooves you, in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you understand your market, where it is now and where it's going. And, obviously my argument is get your customers to be part of that process, because they probably, are a couple steps ahead of you anyway.
Yeah. Well, I just want to call out the old friend of ours, Reg Baker, just joined. And so giving a shout out to Reg. Good to see your name pop up.
Mr. SMR.
Yes.
I saw Reg on a recent SMR webinar, but I don't need to plug his stuff anymore.
Yeah, yeah. You called in all your favors already, so yeah,
Of course.
yeah. So and then Brittany Hines Martinez joined as well. So welcome and thanks for listening in. So I mean, we've had a pretty wide ranging discussion. But I think it's time to start wrapping up. So if anybody out there is watching has questions, definitely throw them into the comments, and Kevin will take a crack at them. And
You say that with utmost confidence there, Steve.
I have every bit of confidence in you, Kevin, to take whatever question and hit it right out of the park.
Thank you.
Yeah, as
Okay, there we go.
any loyal New York Mets fan would do.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
More likely, go down swinging with the bases loaded, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, you do have a great taste in sports teams with the Mets and the Jets. So.
Oh yeah, chosen wisely there. Talk about the madness of crowds.
And yeah, tribalism right there.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, yeah, if I were to sum it up a little bit, in terms of the suggestion, it's as we move forward, if you can create more proactive opportunities to co-create with your customers, to allow their diversity and energy to be part of the consideration, and use that as inspiration to get to a better starting point. And as my research indicates, again, deliberation is the enemy of wisdom, if you will. You want to allow opportunity for collective, independent ideation, so that you can start to capture that many different views, and then slowly move towards convergence and coalescing around some ideas. And so that becomes because what you want to do, in a sense, is have the courage to really swing for the fences, and not settle for just another incremental innovation. And to your point, I mean, the new normal, who the hell knows what the new normal is going to be? So it's like, it is probably a great time to start thinking about different ways your business can go, and making sure that that's consistent with where your customers are winding up. I mean, they may not be thinking about it right now. I mean, they've got obviously a lot of other things on their mind, but they could start giving you some clues and tips about what's important to them moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's wise advice. I think there's companies that are being forced to innovate right now in ways they couldn't have comprehended 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there's and bringing your audience in there, because your audience has changed. If you're going to innovate, your audience has changed. Your target customer has changed since the beginning of March. So in order to innovate for them, you're going to have to reacquaint yourself with them, and you have to bring them into the process. And I think that's extraordinarily valuable. So
right.
With that, we're going to wrap it up here. And I really appreciate you taking some time out of your pandemic day to share your wisdom and with the crowd,
Thank you.
such as it is. And
yeah, there you go.
I'm sure.
Well, it's like I said before. It's like, when this whole thing started, it was like, stay safe, and now it's like, I think your adage was stay healthy, and mine is more of stay sane, because it's it's going to take a while before this resolves itself. And yeah, there will be more madness of crowds. There's going to be when there's not enough direction, and when we feel that our herds are moving in a certain direction, we're going to be chasing that. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this as we move forward, but that shouldn't discourage us from recognizing the duality, that the same person who is like going to Walmart 5 times a day trying to find toilet paper is also not capable of some really great ideation and some great direction for us.
Right. Well, it sounds like
All right, so I'll let you go out and search your toilet paper now.
Okay, sounds like a plan. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Um, LinkedIn is always good. Twitter, it's just at K Lonnie, and or the home office, which is klcommunications.com. So you can always find me there too.
All right. Well, that sounds good, Kevin. Thanks again for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and we'll say that to everybody out there.
There we go. There we go. In that order.
In that order. And we'll see everybody
right.
soon. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure.